Hello everyone, I'm Sylvia from Fairlight Tarot. Welcome to my channel. So I've been reorganizing my space and I've changed the filming location in the house, so hopefully this room will be much quieter, but it's a trial, so let's see how it goes. Today we are going to do a really fun VR and it's called Pop Culture Decks to Robyn's Reflections. I watched her videos, I think it was yesterday, and it was so much fun. I knew I had to pick up that VR. So Robyn is basically looking at tarot decks that can be associated with a few prompts, and these few prompts are based on popular culture. I will link our video in the description box below, and we're also going to have a look at each and every prompt. So Robyn has associated each prompt with a pop song, and I'm going to do the same following her advice. So for the first prompt, we have Like a Virgin, and the prompt is the deck that popped your pop culture deck cherry. In my case, it had to be the Milo Manara deck. It's a tarot deck published by Los Carabeo. I think this is a very old, as you can see, very old edition. It's been reprinted after that, and I think it's still in print. I could be wrong, but in any case, for each and every deck that I'm going to show you today, if they're still available, I am definitely going to link the website where you can find them in the description box below. Now, this deck is based on Milo Manara. Manara is a very famous artist, graphic novel artist, and is an illustrator. And it was very famous and still is because of his really, really elegant, beautiful, erotic art. As you can imagine, this deck is a bit salacious, let's put it this way. So what I'll do, I'll just be very mindful of, not being age restricted. So hopefully that won't happen. But what I'd like to draw your attention to is the beauty of these images. I mean, it's got a lot of erotical references, and the imagery is very suggestive, but there is such beauty to it. The artwork is just spectacular, and there's a really nice combination of color palettes and the kind of style that is at times reminiscent of Art Nouveau, for example. As you can see, it's definitely one of the old Los Carabeo decks. I don't have the newer edition. I do hope that when they did print the new one, they actually were more mindful about these really ugly black borders. I thought about trimming it, but to be honest with you, this deck is such amazing, and it's actually quite, I think this edition is becoming sought after, so I will definitely not do any kind of modification to this particular deck. Very beautiful art style, as I said before. There is very suggestive kind of nudity. The imagery is very evocative as well. I really like the image of the fool. So basically, this is, if you're familiar with the story, this is Pinocchio by Carlo Collodi. It's an Italian fairy tale about this wooden boy that has been created by his dad, Carlo Collodi, because he felt really, really lonely, and he carved out of a wooden block, he carved out this, figure of a boy. And the legend says that he actually started talking and he was coming alive. Everything looked like a real boy, but one thing, he wasn't. But that always was his wish, to be able to become a real boy. And its peculiarity was that whenever he was telling a lie, his nose grew. And I think that that has become so ingrained into the popular culture, probably all around the world. Or maybe I'm exaggerating, but I do recognize this in the English-speaking world. For example, you say that your nose is growing whenever you're telling a lie, and that actually comes from Pinocchio. So this is the Fata Turchina, and it's the fairy that is supposed to turn a Pinocchio into a real boy. Such an amazing deck. So this is my choice for the prompt, like Virgin, the deck that popped your pop culture deck, Cherry. The second prompt is Love to Love Your Baby, a pop culture deck that you love. And I had to go with my 2 copies of the Dylan Dog Tarot. Now, Dylan Dog, if you watch my channel before, you know that I absolutely adore this comic book. It was first, I think, printed in 1987, and it actually still is in print. Every time I go to Italy, there's a shop in the airport in Venice. They have really, really old issues, and they're so kind. They have like hundreds of them. And they're so kind that they actually price them at the current prices. So they are collectible items, but you can buy them for the price you would buy a new issue. So it's just fantastic. Every time I go there, I buy like 20 issues, and I bring them back to Australia, and I just take my time in reading them, because it just reminds me so much of when I was a teenager, and I just literally loved the horror genre. And Dylan Dog is the investigator of nightmares, so he's literally a let's say an old take of Supernatural. If you watch Supernatural, the show, you will know what I mean. So he's investigating all these supernatural episodes, weird creatures, beasts, and everything. These 2 editions are quite different. This is just I wanted to show you a couple of examples of the comic books that I have. This is actually number 26, and it's from 1993. It always is in black and white, although every now and then they do come out with a color issue. But everyone in Italy will recognize this face. And the reason why it is my choice for this prompt is because we all fell in love with Dylan Dog, the character. If you were a kid in the 80s, you could not fall in love with him. It's just the kind of, he was the bad boy. He was always in trouble. He was always, but in the end, he was the one that was saving everyone. And the stuff that happened to him, you really rooted for him, because he was not perfect. He had so many issues. He had so many flaws, and that was the kind of character you wanted to see, at least back then. And I think even now. In a comic book, because he wasn't perfect, but he was winning. Even after failing so many times, he was eventually winning out of his good heart. He had a good heart. So let's have a look at the decks. I have both editions. I really try hard. Let's see if I can zoom in to get 2 editions, because this one is from it doesn't say here, but it's from 1991, I think. If it's not 91, it's 93, 92, something like that. But it's majors only, and it was the original that has been printed. Maybe it says something here. 91, there you go. So 1991 Torino by Lo Scarabeo. So as you can imagine, this is, to me, is a fantastic collectible item. I really am over the moon that I was able to find this. It came to me that was mint in box, and but I had to open it. I had to, because I really had to, have a look at how very, very beautiful it was. So these are all characters from the many issues that have been published by Bonelli. Sergio Bonelli is the publishing house. Now, as you can imagine, because this particular deck was from 1991, they only had enough issues and enough characters to come out with the majors only. And that's the reason why when I had this, I also really did my best to find the the second edition, which was a full 78 cards tarot deck, and it's this one here. So what they did in this, I think this is from the year 2000, could be 2017. So what they've done, I'm not too sure, but it's very recent, and you can tell by the layout of the card as well. The Scarabeo, generally speaking, the older editions still have the 4 languages at the 4 corners, but this one is a more recent edition, so it must have been 2017. This is a full size deck. I love the backs, by the way. And they kept the same 22 major arcanas, but when it came to, you know, the choice for the minor arcanas, obviously, because this was published in 2017, all of a sudden they had so many more issues of the comic book that they could have a look at to find inspiration. And you can definitely tell there's also more recent episodes in here. And but they're all you know, thematically the same, because the comic book has always stayed the same. Truth to the very first issue, this character has never changed, never evolved, in kind of a very reassuring way, I must say, because every time you buy a new issue of Dylan Dog, you know what you're going to find, even though the stories are always different and they're always very evocative and very, very cool. But the character is true to himself. I really love this 6 of Wands, because it's depicting him on a gondola in Venice, and I'm from Venice, and I just really, really adore when a tarot deck has, you know, a depiction of my favorite city in Italy. But it was based, by the way, Dylan Dog was based in London. It was written by Tiziano Sclavi originally, who was Italian, and all the illustrators, or most of the illustrators, are Italian. One of them is, by the way, Corrado Roy, who's done a couple of tarot decks. One is Murder of Crows, and the other one is fairly new, and it's called The Dark Side of Tarot. And it's the style is very similar, though, between all of these. So these two were the Dylan Dog Tarot, and it was my prompt for a pop culture deck that you love. The prompt is sorry, not sorry, and it's a pop culture deck that missed the mark, and I had to go with the Godfather Tarot. Now, I know I've talked about this tarot a couple of times in my channel already, and the other couple of times was actually kind of positive, which I still am, I suppose. The problem is that whenever you use this deck in reference to The Godfather, you know, the trilogy, it kind of misses the mark for me. So let's explain what I mean. It's a beautiful deck. The fact that the minors are kind of fully illustrated, it's a plus, and so I was so convinced that that was not going to be the case. I was so ready, braced myself to find the minors to be actually pippish, that when I saw that they were not, I think I got a very, probably an exaggeratedly good reaction. Like I probably liked this deck more than what I should have. And so the majors are absolutely beautiful. They are spot on. It's a very interesting take on the movies. If you watch the movies, you will know it's about the Italian family of the Corleone that live in America, but they still have really strong roots back to their origins in Sicily. And I really enjoyed watching that. I haven't watched the movies in a while, let's say, but it had some really terrific actors. It had Al Pacino, it had Diane Keaton as well. So many actors that then became even more famous after this movie, thanks to this movie. I think that this is my pick for the Sorry Not Sorry, so a deck that actually missed the mark, because I can use it on its own and it works just fine. What I think though is that in some cases I would have preferred to see more specific, probably references to the movies. So if I read this deck on its own, it's absolutely fine. It's a good reader, sharpshooter. But if I refer back, you know, to the movies, I kind of miss a lot of, not necessarily a lot of the scenes of the movie, a lot of what happens in the movie, but something that made the movie into something that I really cherish watching, into something that I watch over and over again because I really, really enjoy it. And this deck probably, you know, missed the mark because my expectations were so high. And it's probably not very fair, to be honest. But it came to me as the right pick for this prompt. So the pop culture deck that missed the mark, and it was the Godfather Tarot. The fourth prompt is Let's Stay Together, a pop culture deck that you will never part with because you are too much of a fan. And here we've got the 22 corals for 22 major arcanas. It's published by Meneghello in Milano, and it's by Maestro Osvaldo Menegazzi. Now this deck is a one of a kind, I would say, or if not a one of a kind, it's one of 250. So it's a limited edition. It was printed in 2019. It's absolutely beautiful. This deck, I just love it so much. It is the typical collector's item. I honestly would not even try reading with it. First of all, you can see the quality. It's that kind of art paper, kind of cardboardy stock. It's got sharp corners. It feels like each and every one of these cards has actually been painted on, even though I know that it's actually been printed. But what I do appreciate it is that they are signed by Maestro Menegazzi with the year of production. It is definitely something that it's not necessarily conducive of a reading. You can probably use it in a reading, but because of the symbology, it is going to be a probably very intuitive kind of deck. So the symbols are, as the title says, 22 corals. Now you need to know that in Italy is surrounded by water. And there is so much of pop culture that is referring to the sea, the water of the Mediterranean Sea in Italy. It spans from, you know, literature to pop songs to traditional songs to any kind of oceanographic studies. There's a lot of people that find their own living in the sea. There's a lot of fishermen. The fisheries industry is very powerful in Italy. So what we do is we, as Italians, we look at the sea because we are completely surrounded by the sea, apart from the top, you know, in which we have the Alps. But the rest of the country is as if it were an island. Anywhere you are in Italy, because of its topography, you're never really too far away from the sea. And as body of water, the sea is something that for us represents hopes and dreams, but it also represents struggle sometimes. It's, you know, you probably, any Italian would probably have some really, really good memories of a kiss at sunset by the sea, or having their first ice cream by the sea. It's something that resonates so much with the entire country's culture. And corals, well, we don't find corals unfortunately everywhere in Italy, but if you ever go to Sicily or Sardinia, or generally speaking the southern part of Italy, you will find really beautiful coral. So as soon as I saw this deck, I knew I had to have it because it's something that it stayed with me. It's not just part of my Italian roots as a culture, but it's also part of my Australian you know, let's say development as a person, because I have become Australian a couple of years ago. And as you can imagine, because of the Great Barrier Reef, Australia has some pretty excellent corals. And so when I saw this deck, when I went to Milano last year, I just, you know, I thought this is the deck for me. I really love the idea of having a deck, even though it's major arcanas only. I really love the idea of having a deck that shows corals associated with the major arcanas. So this was my pick for the prompt number 4. Let's stay together, a pop culture deck that you will never part with because you are too much of a fan. Prompt number 5 is Hit Me Baby One More Time, a deck that you wish had a sequel or a deck you would buy again to share. This to me, this is the Venetian Tarot by Eugene Vinitsky. This to me is definitely an example of a deck that I really wish had a reprint with a slightly different cardstock. So I've shown this deck before. I'm from Venice. Venice is in my blood. The Venetian Republic, La Serenissima, it's something that I am always referring to whenever I think about my roots, I think about my cultural roots, and so this deck had to be in this VR. But it is in this particular prompt because I wish there were a reprint of this deck, simply for the reason that this deck is amazing. The color are fantastic. This quality is great. As you can see, it's got the very expensive kind of gold gilding. However, because of the really glossy, as you can see, catching the light at every turn finish, I tend not to use it. It is very beautiful and it's the right choice for sure when it comes to, you know, really popping those colors, which are very saturated and brilliant, and I wouldn't change the colors at all in an hypothetical second edition. What I would definitely do though would be to try at least, I don't know, maybe a linen finish. I don't really know because I'm not an expert on these kind of things. I do know that because of this really super glossy kind of finish, I don't necessarily use this deck. It's not a big deal in the sense that it's such a beautiful deck, and each and every card reminds me so much of my own experience with the carnival in Venice, or Venice the city. You know, the gondolas, the canals, the smell. I don't know. I know that every time I say this, everyone goes, the smell. If you ever go to Venice, or if you were born in the area, if you're familiar with anything that is typical of Venice, you will know what I mean with the smell. And it's not a bad smell, don't get me wrong. Most of the time it's a mix of, you know, water, seawater, and grilled seafood, if it makes any sense. I know that it might not, but it's exactly what it is. You just walk along the canals, you cross the bridges, you look at the canals and you smell the seawater, and then you turn the corner and there's always a restaurant which is grilling seafood. It's that kind of smell, and it's amazing. It's most strong during the summertime, but in winter, for example, you have the carnival, which is the main reason why tourists would actually go to Venice, I believe. Although Venice, let me tell you, is beautiful, absolutely gorgeous in any season. And if you've never been there, I highly recommend it because it's just a dream city. And if you do, make sure that you go high up, maybe on the Campanile, because the views from the Campanile are just spectacular. So this is the Venetian Tarot, and it is my pick for a deck that you wish had a sequel, because I really wish that there was a new print with a different cardstock. Prompt number 6 is You Rock My World, cards that blend tarot and pop culture perfectly. And I've chosen the Symbolic Soul Tarot by Elisa Seisinger. This deck is fantastic, and the reason why it's my pick for this prompt is because there is so much culture in the choice of these cards that it just blows my mind every time I use it, which is quite often. I find new elements that I did not know existed, and it's just that kind of surprise that makes it so that for you it's like you have a new deck every time you use it. Now, Elisa Seisinger is a fantastic Italian painter and artist, and she is also the creator of the Tarot of the Hidden Star, Le Tarot de l'Étoile Cachée. This deck is slightly different, although you can recognize the typical art style from this artist. I really love the production value of this deck. You do have this gold foil, which is not at all distracting. I find that sometimes some gold foil or gold stamping on cards is a bit distracting, especially when it's not too subtle and you find yourself looking at a blob of gold on a card without having any kind of shading, for example. In this case, it's not like that. It is actually quite pleasant to look at. And the difference is, I think, because you got a 90% black and white kind of configuration, and then you do have these splashes of gold foil that make it pop out. I really enjoy using this deck. It's just amazing. Every time I look at it, I really also enjoy reading the guidebook, even though it's a deck that you can quite easily use without it because it's an RWS deck. But the fact is that whenever you pick a card, for example this Five of Pentacles, and you look at the description in the guidebook and you find out that, well, this I actually knew from my knowledge of popular culture in Italy, but these two figures are the Mamutones. So the Mamutones are traditional from Sardinia, the island of Sardinia. And these figures, basically, they wear these really heavy, dark wooden masks on their faces, and they go around clothed in these kind of fur, and they also wear bells around their necks. And the reason why they wear bells around their necks is because they have to warn the population that they're coming. So there's a kind of this idea of being left out in the cold, of being the victim of, you know, being outcast or exiled by society, that is really recurrent in this Five of Pentacles. And it's actually the way I read the Five of Pentacles as well. So I'm really, really grateful to be able to spot these kind of really small detail, but very, very interesting ones that make the experience of bonding with this deck all the more enjoyable. And it's not just related to the graphics, you know, the art style, which is really beautiful. As I said before, the production value, which is excellent. But the fact that it's got so much that I can recognize as my own culture. And so this is the Symbolic Soul Tarot by Elisa Seitzinger, and it was my pick for cards that blend tarot and pop culture perfectly. And now we've come to the bonus prompt, which is showing what you got, and it's any more pop culture decks you'd like to share. Now, I absolutely want to share the Cecoli Tarot. I know that you know, everyone knows this deck. Nicoletta Cecoli is an Italian artist from San Marino. San Marino is an independent protectorate in the middle of the country. She speaks Italian. She's you know, when it comes to San Marino, I think that people from San Marino, and I actually know someone who was born there, and they confirmed this, they pretty much feel Italian, even though it's supposed to be an independent protectorate. And you know, if you're a traveler like me, you really love this, because whenever you go there, it counts as a different country for you. I know it might sound really lame, but that if you're a traveler, you would know what I mean. This deck is very well known, very well loved, but I think it's got a bit of a love and hate kind of relationship with a lot of tarot readers, because it's a very intense kind of deck. Some of the cards are very confrontational, I would say. My relationship with this deck was absolutely very common, I would say. At the beginning, I was almost kind of scared by some of these cards. Then I started appreciating it. I was always a fan of Nicoletta's artwork. I really enjoy it, and I think that it's unique. It's absolutely unique. The combination of, you know, the distortion of the proportion of the figures, for example, in many cases, they have really tiny bodies but big heads. This is even more clear in this card. There's also distortion of perspective in many cases. There's a lot in this deck that reflects an incredible knowledge of artistic media. And I really appreciate that. I love the way she's also chosen these images, and the fact that this tarot has been a collaboration, you know, in order to find the right way to depict the minor and the major arcanas. I think that it's the kind of deck that can give you so much once you get to know it. But I also know that it can be, at times, quite confrontational. I've seen a lot of people using this deck, for example, for inner child work, and I completely agree. It is the kind of deck that will definitely dig deep into your subconscious and, you know, bring out and give a voice to your inner child in such a way that you can immediately recognize what the issues are and eventually start working on them. So this was the Nicoletta Ceccoli Tarot, and it's my pick for the bonus prompt. Any more pop culture decks you'd like to share? Now, this VR was so much fun to do. I am so very grateful to Robyn for having created that. I hope there will be a lot of other people picking it up because it's so much fun. And something that Robyn said is that, for example, she chose the American pop culture because she's American. Obviously, I've chosen the Italian pop culture because I'm Italian, but it would be so much fun to see, you know, each and every TarotTuber just picking this VR and showing the rest of the community what your own pop culture is and your choices in relation to all of these prompts. So thank you so much for staying with me till the end of this video. If you liked it, please consider subscribing to my channel. More to come. Have a great day.